Hello, welcome to 70 Years, 70 Muppets, a Muppet fan podcast presented by toughpigs.com. This is the podcast where we celebrate the Muppets' 70th anniversary with 70 straight weeks of spotlights on our favorite Muppet characters, from the most popular to the most obscure. I am this week's host, Drake Lucas, and the Muppet of the Week is Gaffer, performed by Kathy Mullen and designed by Michael Frith, making their world debut in 1980. I'm very pleased to have Gaffer's performer, Kathy Mullen, here to tell the real story behind everyone's favorite theater cat. Thanks so much for joining me to talk about one of your most iconic characters, Gaffer, the cat. And it's just a pleasure to have you here.
Well, thank you. Thank you. A pleasure to be here.
So we all know that the Muppet Show is really known for their dogs. Do you have any idea how Gaffer came about and why they wanted to add a cat into the mix?
Well, it's not what you think. It has nothing to do with cats or anything like that. It had to do with Jim Henson wanting me to be in training for The Dark Crystal, his movie that he was working on. When I first joined Muppets, it was the summer of the first Muppet movie, the Muppet movie. And then I went from there to the Muppet Show. During that time, the Muppets, the company was working on The Dark Crystal. They were working on design, they were working on script, they were working on everything. And it was a huge project for them, and it had been going on for several years already by the time I got there. When I first kind of got involved and went out to Hollywood, Jim was looking for a female puppeteer. He had a couple of gals that had been there and had, worked for Sesame Street and for the Muppet Show, but he wanted somebody who he felt could do this next thing, which was, quote, realistic acting with a puppet. This is what he was looking for. He said to me practically the very first month I knew him, I think you can do this. Get to work, right? So that's why I was at the Muppet Show. That's what I was supposed to be learning. And he said, listen, I was doing little background things and helping out and assisting and right-handing and all those things, and also working in the shop. This is the first year. He said, I think it was the second year Gaffer came into play. So I got this idea, or somebody had the idea for a cat like the backstage cat. Maybe somebody knew a backstage cat. I don't know, that we can put up on the shelf right here that will always be in the background of our backstage scenes. So that'll give you the opportunity to just sit there for all the time this backstage scene is being played and mess around. Just mess around with it. Upstage if you can, do anything you can think of, but keep it realistic. So that the task was to have a realistic cat, but to do as much experimentation as I could to get more used to the camera, to get more used to puppeteering in a more realistic way, as we were calling it, because they knew that the Dark Crystal was going to be different from the Muppet Show characters and how they moved. So that's why the cat was a realistic cat, not a Muppety cat, not with big googly eyes and the whole thing. It was a realistic cat. That was the idea of it. So it was a training exercise. That's what Gaffer was there for. That's what I was doing it for. And that's what it became. Now, Gaffer did other things in the show. There was a song and some other things that happened just because people put it in a script, right? But basically, I was meant to be in that backstage shot the whole time it was being shot, just messing around.
So was any of it scripted? Did you have particular things that you had to do during an episode, or was it all just improvisation?
No, I mean, unless there was a bit that was done with the cat, like the cat came back, which was a song, and the cat came back was Gaffer. So Gaffer just moved through the whole song. But basically speaking, I was just up there in the corner doing whatever the heck I wanted.
Now, it looks so chaotic, not even below the frame, but above the frame, there's arrows flying, there's penguins walking through, there's all kinds of stuff. What was it like below the frame, and how did you manage to stay in that corner with everything happening around?
There's a little balcony back there. That was like a separate little section. I mean, everything that was happening downstage was not really happening back there. We had this separate little section that was blocked off, basically. You had your monitor. You could see what was going on. If I needed to spot something with the cat's eyes, I could see it. If there was something going on in the balcony. They were up there with me, so we were all up there. And sometimes there was stuff. Piggy would come out and do this, that, and whatever. Different people would come out of that door and do stuff. And then there was a stairway, and I think you'd have to go by where I was standing to get down the stairway. So if Piggy was coming out or whoever, Scooter coming out and going down the stairway, they would go by where I was standing. So I was just stuck in that little corner, you know.
Did you always know when the camera was on you? Or did you have to constantly keep moving?
I was always supposed to be there when we were doing those backstage scenes. That was my job, was to have Gaffer in that spot. Unless for some reason Gaffer was not supposed to be there because he was going to do something else later. But generally speaking, my job was to be in the cat, in the spot for all the backstage scenes.
Did you ever try something with Gaffer that didn't work?
Probably a million things. Oh, come on, Drake, it's so long ago. I'm sure I tried a million things that didn't work because, you don't know what's going to work until you try it, which is true, always true of the Muppets. You didn't get much in the way of prep time. You got thrown on stage and maybe you had a rehearsal, maybe two, if you were lucky. If there was a lot of stuff going on that had to be coordinated, there might be a couple of rehearsals, but that was it. There was no figuring out things before you went. You had to figure out what you were thinking of doing and know what you were going to try if you needed to for whatever reason. For instance, if there was a group of characters and they had a little song and dance routine, it was up to the puppeteers to figure out what their choreography was. There wasn't anybody coming in and saying, okay, we're going to do this, this, and this. It was a puppeteer saying, okay, we'll go right, left, then up, down, then left, right, then bounce out. Okay, right? Okay. That was it. That was our choreography. First time we ever had a choreographer was on Muppet Caper. Jim actually hired a choreographer. I don't remember how that went. I think it was mostly for the people. But she also tried to choreograph the puppets. That was a little less successful.
I feel like the puppeteers were a little maybe like to go rogue sometimes or do their own thing.
Well, there was a saying on the Muppet Show: if you can upstage someone, go for it.
That tracks.
Always trying to do something in the background that would upstage the foreground. And it was a challenge, a running challenge to anybody who was in the background. So Jim didn't object to this at all. If you could do it, okay.
See, now that's interesting. I would think for a successful background character, you wanted to stay out of the way, feature the person in front. It sounds like you were saying a successful background character is trying to steal the scene, trying to get in there.
However, there's always too much, You want to do something funny and cute. You want to make your character seen, but you don't want to actually detract from the scene. You don't want to like go crazy in the background and ruin a take. That's the other thing that was always super important on anything we were doing, is don't ruin a take. However, many a puppeteer became famous for not liking what they had done and just pulling their puppet down. Sorry, my bad, This was frequently done, especially by people who could get away with it. Not me, I couldn't get away with it.
Was there a particular puppeteer that used to do that a lot?
Oh, I don't know if there's anybody particular. Everybody did it a little bit. Everybody who could get away with it. I do remember once Frank was trying to do, admittedly, a difficult physical puppet thing. He was trying to get a prairie dog puppet to take a sock from somewhere and put it exactly in a certain spot on the set, which is not easy to do when you're up over your head looking down at a monitor. It's not easy to do because you have to spot it and then get it. He must have done 40 takes trying to get.
And did he get it?
Yeah, of course. Yes. And it was like, yeah. I mean, there was that kind of thing that would happen, but the other kind of thing that would happen would be, say we were doing one of the numbers that were known as the 2-minute bits. Gaffer would be in some of these too, depending if they're animals and stuff. I can't really remember, but what I remember about the 2-minute bits, there was 2 minutes of the show that weren't seen in the United States because of the ads that ran in the US. but that were seen in the UK. So we had 2 minutes to fill with something for the UK. Because it was only for the UK, it was always left to the very last minute on Friday. When Friday came, the lights were going to turn out at 7 o'clock, no matter what. Didn't matter where you were, didn't matter if you hadn't finished, didn't matter if you didn't get a take, the lights went out because that's what the studio did. So we would do these 2 minute bits at the end of the day on Fridays. Now, as you know, as I just said, there wasn't much rehearsal. So there was almost no rehearsal for this. It was just fly by the seat of your pants time. It would be totally wacky. It would be so fast. I mean, there were heads in the shot. There was all kinds of stuff. But some of the funniest things happened in those 2 minute bits just because it was so impromptu. It could get very funny. And sometimes there were a lot of people involved. Sometimes there were only few people involved. It just depended on what the bit was.
And did they just leave a lot of it in because they had no choice? You got to go with what you can take in the.
The lights went out. That was it. You got what you got. That's what went in the show. Absolutely. It was very seat of your pants. Well, if you look back at the Muppet Show now, it has this wonderful, as you say, improvisational feel. It feels very rough and ready in a lot of ways. If you look at things that were done down the line, as things got more and more sophisticated, and they got more and more sophisticated in many ways. I mean, they got technologically, just the puppetry got more sophisticated. The ways of doing certain things with the puppets got more sophisticated. Nowadays, now this is long after my time, but nowadays you can take out an arm wire in post. You don't even have to worry about it. You know, we were always worrying about showing arm wires. We always wanted to keep the puppet's arms down close to the bottom of the frame so you wouldn't see these arm wires, or we were painting them the color of the background or doing anything to hide the arm wires. You can still see them, but we didn't want them to be in your face. Nowadays, it doesn't matter. If you want to raise a puppet's hand like this with the arm wire coming all the way through the shot, so what? They're just going to make it disappear in post. I'm so jealous.
Now, did you have a favorite part of the process? Did you like the table read? Did you like rehearsals? Did you like guest stars? Like is there something you look forward to every week?
I do think the table read was always a lot of fun. There wasn't a lot of pressure on a table read. You know, there was no pressure really. You were just sitting around a table, usually with the guest star. The first day of the guest star was at the table read, and it could be a lot of fun because the guys were very loosey-goosey and they would, just be silly, and so that was always fun. And then after that, we would do a music rehearsal with our music director, just learn the stuff that we had to learn for the week for that episode. So he would give us our harmonies if we needed them, the melodies, blah, 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 blah. And everybody had a little tape recorder, a mini tape recorder. So you could record your part and the melody so that you could go home and learn it. And that's how we did it. So yeah, that was always fun. Because it was so loosey-goosey, it was very often just so silly. I don't know how we got away with a lot of what I remember. It was the John Denver show. John became a friend, and anyhow, we were doing this bit called Grandma's Feather Bed, and there was this big bed in the set, and we were all underneath the bed with the holes in the mattress with our arms up through into whatever puppet we were doing. There's a lot of puppets in the bed, and John is singing the song, and different puppets keep popping up. I can't remember how it went exactly, but we got into a giggle fit underneath that bed that stopped the show for a long time. Thank God John Denver was as easygoing as he was, because he was laughing right along with anybody else. He didn't care at all. You couldn't have done that with any star, believe me. Many stars were very uptight, very, very nervous, very insecure, and
Really? On the Muppet Show?
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, people are people, no matter who they are, no matter what their accomplishments. And a lot of performers are insecure people. This is commonplace. So you would find people that were super easy and people that were super difficult, and most of the time it was in between, as with everything, right?
Frank Oz was very he's well known for having backstories for his characters. Did you have a backstory for Gaffer? Whatever happened to his eye or her eye?
No, that was just a design. I always think of Gaffer as a he, not a she. That's interesting. But anyhow, I always thought of Gaffer as just a scruffy backstage cat that she was lucky that he got fed, but probably the janitor fed him. He was just there. He was just there catching rats, whatever, keeping the mice population down.
Well, it didn't seem to work. There seemed like a lot of rats around that stage. There is one great scene with Rizzo. I think it's from The Muppets Go to the Movies, where something's happening with Beauregard and Kermit out front, and then Gaffer's in the back pulling Rizzo by the tail to him, and Rizzo's like responding. And then, if you did something like that, did you work that out ahead of time with the other puppeteer so that you kind of knew, or would you just try something and see if it worked?
I mean, I don't even remember this bit, but I tell you what it would have been. It would have been Steve Whitmire, who did Rizzo. He invented Rizzo. We had a bunch of rats, and Steve was like me. He came in at the same time, a lot younger than me, but he came in at exactly the same time on the Muppet movie. And he was desperate to have a character, right? So he invented one. He took one rat, started dressing him up in little costumes and walking through them. Nobody objected. You could walk through the back of a shot in the backstage scene without anybody objecting to it. So what we probably did is he said, "Okay, let's do this. We'll have this little thing, and we'll do it in the background and see what happens." And I probably said, "Oh, sure," and we did, and I don't remember what happened. Was somebody did Jim say, "Okay, you guys, enough"? He may have, but I can't remember.
I don't even know if you would notice if you weren't, of course, I've been focused on Gaffer, looking at all these scenes, but I wonder if you'd even notice if you weren't like looking for it, or if you just happen to glance, you kind of see it.
Well, the fact is that's the truth. You wouldn't necessarily notice. The idea of the quote, what I'll call the upstaging, that people were kind of freely allowed to do unless it got out of hand, was that there would be visual interest going on, that although you might not see it the first time you saw the show, you might see it the second or third time if you were into that. And a lot of people are, you know. That was just a kind of attitude that was there on the Muppet Show. Do what you can, make it funny if you can. If you're in a bit and you could come up with something funny for your character do it. Otherwise, if you're just going to sing along with everybody else, that's fine, that works. But if you can figure out some little hoop-de-doo to do, to make it interesting or special, that was up to the puppeteer. Nobody said do it or don't do it. If you could come up with it and get away with it, go for it. So I think it made the show, that loosey-goosey feeling, very kind of, it made it fun. The Muppet Show was always fun. That's the one thing about it that I remember well. I felt under pressure now and again when I had to do something I hadn't done before, because I was a newbie and I didn't know much. I was just learning. So if I had to do something I hadn't done before, I would try to get myself some help. I would go ask. I'd go say to Frank or whatever, I say, "Would you help me with this?" He would say, "Oh, okay, what?" He didn't make it easy, but the fact was he's such a sweetheart, that's just his way of being funny. But I didn't know at the time. Was that a joke? I'm not sure. It was usually a joke. But yeah, I would go get help, try to get hints and help. That wasn't something you weren't taught. You had to learn it on your own. Nobody was there to teach you how to do this or to teach you how to do that. You had to watch what they were doing and try to repeat. That was the only way you could learn. Again, I remember on Dark Crystal, since we were trying to do something very different, Frank was assigned to give me these training sessions once a week. We would take one lunch hour a week to have these training sessions. I don't know what I thought it was going to be. I thought he was going to give me some puppeteer hints on, what move would be sad, would express sadness, what move would express surprise, that kind of thing. No, he wanted to do acting exercises. And I thought, acting exercises, I've done that for 20 years. I want to know how to move the puppet. That's what I don't know. But in a way, I think he was right going in that way, because it forced me to kind of figure out, how is the puppet going to do that? And one of the things that he really taught me during that time and subsequently was the value of stillness. If you watch Frank Oz in any performance, you'll see very clearly how he uses stillness, how he'll stop, and he'll take that moment before moving on. And that moment, whether it's a comedy moment or a dramatic moment or any moment, the moment of stillness is the moment in which it all happens. It doesn't happen when the puppet is moving around. It happens when the puppet stops. And Frank would say, I want to see that puppet think. And I'm saying to myself, puppets don't think. What are you talking about? But what he was talking about was the stillness. In that stillness, the audience will think for the character. The audience will think what this character is thinking. And it's very hard to trust, especially when you're new, that stillness, that doing nothing is going to hold an audience. Very hard to trust. So it was really Frank who, over time, helped me to understand stillness and how it works, particularly with a puppet. A good comedian, a good actor does it all the time, especially in the movies. But puppeteer, it's another story. Most puppeteers, especially young puppeteers, tend to want to move all the time. They want to have this going on or that going on. They don't want to hold still for fear that'll appear that they're dead, right? We just have the challenge of make the puppet breathe and see if you can hold attention with just breathing. Just breathing. And you can, really can. I think that was one of the things Gaffer was about and meant to be about for me. See if you can keep that cat alive. I mean, obviously you can't move that cat all the time. You have to keep the cat alive through that whole scene. The cat can't walk off. I was stuck in a hole. The cat can't leave. The cat is there. So you have to keep it alive. I could keep it alive just sleeping and breathing, but I could also, a lot of the time, observe, and a lot of the time just ignore and do your own thing. Yawn, whatever cats do. But it was all about keeping it alive without being able to move all over the place. How do you do that? That was part of the training. Was it a conscious part of the training? To a degree, yes. I mean, I've analyzed it, right, over the years. But I don't think Jim thought, oh, well, because I want her to learn how. I said, no, just keep the cat alive. You'll learn. And it was absolutely true. I did learn. And that was probably quite important for by the time we got to Dark Crystal, I was much more prepared to make that puppet move in a realistic way. And that's what had to be done. That's why I assisted Frank on Yoda. When he did Yoda the first time for Empire Strikes Back, I was his assistant. That was why, because that was a big research and development project for Dark Crystal. Jim and Frank wanted to figure out how a puppet, a realistic puppet, Yoda, was going to move on a screen that was 60 feet across. How is he going to walk? Is he fast? Is he slow? All these things. And I was there to learn the same thing as Frank was learning it. And I remember after the first shot that we did with Yoda, I can't even remember what shot it was, but there we always went to the rushes. At the end of a shooting day on a movie, you usually have dailies, and you don't have to go, but anybody who wants to see what was shot that day would go. So of course we wanted to see, because we wanted to see the very first thing Yoda did. So we went, obviously, I went with Frank to see it. And we sat there, and Frank was just going like this. Oh my God. Oh my God, that's awful. Oh, we were both going, well, he said, we got to pull it back, way back. And we shot it over.
Oh,
He
wow. You
insisted.
reshot the whole.
We reshot that scene. I don't know if it was the whole scene. I can't remember how much it was, but oh, he insisted. He went to the director and said, I can't let this go. I have to shoot it again.
Mhm.
And he said, fine. And we did. And Frank did. He took it way back, way back. And, you know, by extension, so did I. I was his right hand, so I had to do what he was doing, whatever it was, right? It was a big learning curve for us all for that movie. So that's why we did Yoda. I mean, it became a thing, but nobody knew that at the time, right? Nobody knew what Yoda was going to become.
So Gaffer, Yoda, all of it is just training for Dark Crystal?
Well, it's what it started out to be. It was the intent of it. It became something else, as these things do. You know, things. I mean, Miss Piggy was never meant to be a big star. It's what she became. You know, and why? Well, lots and lots of reasons. I said to you when we talked about this that I wanted to mention that I'm doing a an art show in Bermuda. My husband, Michael Frith, who was art director for the Muppets for 20 years, designed tons and tons and tons and tons of stuff, everything you can possibly imagine. And we're doing an art show, an exhibit, a retrospective of his whole life and career, including his Muppet years, which was 20 years, which there's so much in there. Anyhow, I did want to mention that this was happening and opens on October the 16th in Bermuda at the National Gallery of Bermuda in Hamilton, which is the capital city there. It's going to include some Muppet characters that we're borrowing from Center for Puppetry Arts in Atlanta. They house a lot of Muppets and they display a lot of Muppets because that's where Muppets has given them many, many things, including the original Fraggles, some of which we will have at the exhibit. We'll have a Dr. Teeth and a Fozzie Bear, two things that Michael designed that we have the original designs for, so it's fun. And then lots of other puppets since the Muppets that we've done.
That sounds amazing. Do you know how long the exhibit will be on for?
It goes until next April, the end of April, 2026. So 6 months.
He also designed Gaffer. I don't know if Gaffer is on your display, but
I didn't even know that. I didn't know Gaffer was designed even. I thought maybe they had a random cat somewhere. I don't know. No, Jim probably said, can you draw me a realistic cat? Sure, you know. So many of these things were, as Michael says, it's throwaway. It's for somebody to build from. I'll design a character and the builders take it from there. And I think it was about the way Piggy became because things become, unless you had it already, like Jim had Kermit, you know, Kermit had been there forever. So Kermit just continued. Piggy became. Same with Yoda. He wasn't, who knew? You know, he became because people loved it. And when people love it, you're going to do more for sure. But this exhibit, I hope, will be as much fun as it looks like it's going to be. And we'll also be doing events, you know, where we'll talk about these things and with an audience and show clips or whatever about various things and talk about them, bring in guests to come and talk some more.
it's this wonderful reminder that at some point, Gaffer or Moki or whoever it is did not exist. And then someone created it, and then someone took that creation and someone made it into something, and then someone made it into something else. It's just a wonderful way to view the art itself. So it sounds very exciting to see all that
Well, this
together.
is what we're very much trying to do. Michael was insistent. He said, if you're going to show my old stuff, you've got to put it in context of what it was. It wasn't art to put on your wall. It was a design for a builder who would take it and make it their own in the way that they built it. Then for a performer who would then take it and make it his or her own as a performance. And then there was the video or the movie or the TV show, whatever it was, that was going to be a whole other thing with many, 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 many more people involved. So it was all this very long collaborative process that, as he said, a character may start with a sketch on a napkin and it becomes Dr. Teeth or it becomes Fozzie Bear, you know? And then if the performer says, you know what I'd like? And the designer says, sure, we can do that. One of my favorite things about Miss Piggy, and we're gonna talk about this in our art show, is when Piggy kind of hit the scene, and it was after Frank's picked up the puppet and started doing funny things with her, that they decided to write her in on a Muppet Show and make her this diva character. And she would had one costume, just one. And Michael saw this and he said, that's a diva in the making if I ever saw one. So he took some downtime at the Muppet Shop and he had the shop build costumes and a set for Piggy. And they dressed her in these gorgeous costumes and put her on this set and took pictures. And then when Frank and Jim came back from England, this was being done in New York. When Frank and Jim came back from England, Michael said, what do you think about this? And Jim looked at them and went, oh, no, you can't do that. She only has one costume. She has to just be one costume all the time. She has to be exactly the same every single time. And Frank looked at it and said, hubba, hubba. Yeah, I like that. And that was it. Piggy became a diva. Consequently, she had books and she had calendars and she had magazine covers. And she exploded. And that was because Frank liked it. And he had a wonderful time playing it.
Yeah, it seems like it.
Things grow and happen. It's collaboration. It's showbiz. So everybody has to put in their part. And if you have some great people, and Jim was famous for picking great people, you would get great stuff. But Gaffer was really intended as a train.
Like Gaffer, that old cat.
Intended. Makes me laugh, but that's what it was.
Well, it's a great training character. Love that little cat.
You know, if you're a cat person, I can see that you might go there. Yeah.
You know what, though? I feel like I had a Gaffer. I had a Gaffer growing up. I had this cat. We rescued it from the backyard when I was like 4 years old. It was great. I could drag it around all day. It just laid around, didn't bother anybody. And then around evening time, we let it out. We never asked any questions. We don't know where it went. Came back with ripped ears, came back with a limp, curled up, was a wonderful house cat. Next night,
Really
you
did have
let
a
it out.
Gaffer.
We did have a Gaffer. We went away for 2 weeks and we told our neighbor to feed our cat and they fed the wrong cat.
Oh, no.
And our cat survived.
Oh, yeah. Well, she would eat. You never have to worry about a half feral cat. What did you name your cat?
Apple. I was 4.
It's so wrong.
It's this tough tomcat name.
And Apple. Mm. But you were a little kid. You had
Of course.
a little kid name for it.
Yeah, I didn't think cats could have real names. So Apple it was. Are you still doing puppeteering, art? What are you working on now?
Right now, I'm doing this art show. This has been a full-time job for me for the past year because Michael's stuff, we don't have all of it, but we have a lot of it. I've had to select from just troves of stuff and also getting the puppets ready, our puppets, because we have a company called No Strings, which the last 20 years, which has done puppet videos for kids in developing countries on issues like we would do a little film on landmine safety for Afghanistan, on HIV, AIDS for West Africa countries. Haiti, we did a bunch of things, sustainable farming, trauma, peace building, all kinds of different issues. And for years we've done this. And so we have a lot of puppets, all built by many of the same freelance puppet builders that have worked for the Muppets on and off for years and years and years. And so we have some amazing puppets that were built over the years, and we'll show a lot of those.
Great. Well, I look forward to hearing more about it. Before we wrap up on Gaffer, is there anything else about this amazing cat or anything from the Muppet Show that you wanted to mention?
Truth is, Drake, I don't remember so much.
You remember quite a bit. This has been lovely to hear your stories.
Stories are another one thing, and day by day, what went on, I couldn't tell you because there's so much, and those are very heady years. There was so much going on with the Muppets in those years. And when I look back, I think I was saying to Michael, I was saying, it's hard to believe that it was only that many years. There was so much stuff crammed in. I can't believe it was only 10 years that I was there. He was there for 20, but I can't believe it. I said there was a hell of a lot of stuff crammed into that time. We just kept going. And that really was what was happening then. So there's not really much more I can Gaffer.
We exhausted the gaffer. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. It's been wonderful to hear all about Gaffer and the art exhibit and the rest of the Muppet Show. I just really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Bye.
70 Years, 70 Muppets is a Muppet Fan podcast presented by toughpigs.com. Hosted by a whole myriad of people and edited by them as well. Produced by Jared Fairclough. The Muppet 70 logo used with permission by the Muppet Studio with thanks to Danny Iglesias, Frank Reich Snyder and Lee Slaughter. Don't forget to follow toughpigs.com on all social media platforms. You can support us by heading to patreon.com/toughpigs or buying a t-shirt at tpublic.com/toughpigs.